Evening, members. I make it 7:15, so we'll start the meeting. Good evening to members of the public, and good evening, officers, and good evening to anyone joining us on the YouTube. We'll move to the agenda now. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Scattergood and Councillor Monday. Unfortunately, no substitutes have been appointed, but otherwise we are all present. Item 2, declarations of interest. Yes. Now, we haven't had apologies, thank you, from Councillor Beavis. So I assume she is on her way. But if not, we'll have to record her as apologies. So item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest that they would like to disclose having regard to the Code of Conduct? Councillor Mrs Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I would declare an NPI for item 5A, 22000787 land at the Airfield Earls Cone. The applicant is known to me. We have had conversations going back over a little while about the application, but only in terms of when it's likely to come to committee, sort of practical things. So I will remain and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spray. So that is actually 5D on the supplementary agenda, but it is, yes, as you say, the application at Earls Cone. Councillor Schweer.
Thank you, Chair. Just the same declaration as Councillor Spray, and I shall also stay and vote in the same communications as well.
Okay. Councillor Mrs Wilson.
And I have the same non-pecuniary interest as well.
Anybody else? Councillor Bowers. There seems to be a problem with the microphone.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. An MPI, I think it's in, I know what item it is, but the item on the agenda, I think it's 5F now, which is 4 Criddle Drive, application number 22038086 PDEM. The application is from Branch District Council. As I'm the Cabinet Member for Asset Management, for transparency, I think it's better to declare an NPI, and I will leave the meeting and take no part in that item. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Councillor Beavis, we're just on item 2, declarations of interest. Do you have any interest you'd like to declare? Thank you, Councillor Beavis. Okay, so we'll now move to item 3, which is minutes of the previous meetings. Unfortunately, the minutes of the meeting of the 1st of November, 15th of November and the 29th of November are not yet available. So we will leave those over to the next meeting for approval. Excuse my coughing. Item 4, public question time. We have no general public questions this evening, so we will move on now to item 5, which are the planning applications. The first application this evening is item 5A, which is application number 22/00450 full at 31A Julian Court Road, Braintree. We do have 2 speakers on this application. The first speaker, forgive me if I pronounce your name incorrectly, but Mr. Akamalofi, who is an objector. You have 3 minutes. If you'd like to come to the table, please. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the committee and the planning committee. We come before the committee today as objectors. We understand that you have the capacity to defer consideration of the application for a specified reason or reasons. We believe we have a very significant reason. We refer to points on the executive summary submitted by the planning committee. 11.11.2, I quote, "There is a natural spring on the site. The council safeguarding maps have identified critical drainage areas outside of but adjacent to the site. Now, our home on Valley Road is situated at the bottom of this site, where we host the overflow of an ever-flowing natural spring. Secondly, Point 7.878 of the executive summary excludes critical recommendations made by the Essex County Council lead local flood authority to the council headed, I quote, summary of flood risk responsibilities for your council. Now, they recommend, we have not considered the following issues as part of this planning application as they are not within our direct remit. Nevertheless, these are all very important considerations for managing flood risk for this development and determining the safety and acceptability of the proposal. Prior to deciding this application, you should give due consideration to the issues below. It may be that you need to consult relevant experts outside your planning team. Now, the first issue they listed was, or is, sequential test in relation to fluvial flood risk. Now, I checked the meaning of that. It actually, simply put, means river flooding which occurs when water level in a stream, ditch, watercourse, or rivers overflow, impacting the surrounding area. Now, in 2014, we raised no objections to 2 buildings being built behind our house on the western side of this property because we don't believe in NIMBYism. The same developer did everything he could as agreed in the approved plans. However, following the pile foundations that these properties required, a pond was relocated into our garden, costing us thousands of pounds. Now, we sought recourse with the council to no avail. So we have come here today to put on record the evidence that the council is fully aware of and is fully advised of the risk to adjacent sites, like our property. We beseech the committee, therefore, to defer this approval until relevant experts carry out, as I quote again, sequential test in relation to fluvial flood risk, as advised by Essex County Council lead flood authority. Now, with climate change as well coming, which is a topical issue everywhere, we are concerned that anything that upsets that natural spring may not happen in the immediate future, but in the near future, it can only get worse. But please bear these thoughts in mind. Thank you very much for your time, sirs and madam.
Thank you very much. The next person wishing to speak is Mr. Matthew Dawes, who is also an objector. Thank you. Could you just put your microphone on, please, to the red button?
There you go. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of myself and my family, I would like to put on record our long-term objection to any plans for building on this small piece of land. We object due to the following risk factors which remain unmitigated by the revised plans. Firstly, the unmitigated risk to the historic setting for the listed building, Hanging Hill Farm. We live in Thorpe Lodge, the listed property next to 31A. Approving these plans will change the historic setting of our property, and additional properties are proposed for the rear of our house, where one has never sat before. This will remove the last link to the original Hanging Hill Farm setting, already impacted by the many previous approved developments to the area. The plans refer to a substantial build-up of trees between Thorpe Lodge and 31A. These are not trees but overgrown shrubs, not evergreen. When pruned during winter, they barely give any cover. We can clearly see into the rear garden of 31A. The proposed plans to construct a fence will require the majority of the shrubs to be removed anyway, as they sit exactly on the border, therefore contradicting the notion that they provide adequate cover. Second is the unmitigated risk to the protected mature oak trees to the rear of Thorpe Lodge. We seriously fear for the future of these trees, where one oak tree has already been lost to a previous development, especially given where shade and debris will affect new residents' ability to enjoy their gardens. This is likely to result in TPOs not being upheld. These oak trees have existed far longer than the houses in the area, aside from our house. Furthermore, one of the developers' garden, the oak trees, hangs over already, and from my understanding, a lot of debris falls into his garden. therefore giving a secondary reason why the TPOs will not be upheld. Third is unmitigated risk to the established wildlife. Excuse me. Badgers, bats, owls, deers, snakes, shrews, foxes, mice will all lose their habitats. We regularly encounter all these species in our garden and the land behind our property. This will not be the case if these habitats feeding grounds are lost due to the approval of this planned construction. Fourth is the unmitigated risk of damage to the properties, including our own listed property. We are concerned about the impact of any significant vibrations during the build. Our house does not have foundations, is not made of brick, it is clearly and notably tilted towards the front. It will not sustain any heavy ground vibrations without damage. Furthermore, our outbuilding is also adjoined to and structurally relying on a derelict outbuilding on the planned Bungalow 3 site. This was missed by the developers on numerous occasions. Both were old farm buildings. We are concerned about maintaining these original structures, and or if the derelict building attached to our building was removed, there would be an impact to our own structure. Fifth is the unmitigated risk of flooding. As previously mentioned, there are rivers everywhere underneath. We have a well in our garden. The garden 31A is saturated, absolutely saturated, regardless of the time of year. So I think that's a very strong point. Sixth is, and finally, is the unmitigated risk to road safety from traffic crossing a busy footpath public right of way. The planned access entry point will double the existing traffic crossing the footpath and create a huge risk to safety. For everyone in the area, this footpath is the key access point to the river. For families, dog walkers, children on bikes, scooters. It is also a key route to Great Bradford's primary school. The access is narrow, cars already struggle to turn in the area, and aside from everyday access, it is not clear how the area and pedestrians would tolerate an emergency access if required. It is a dog leg, the access, and it's proven in the comments how tricky that will be. In summary, the proposed development of this land has been an ongoing planning proposal for decades, and all previous applications have been refused. Whilst council time and money is spent considering this new application, these latest proposals are subject to the same objections as all of the previous applications. They do not provide mitigations to any of the risks outlined above for this application or any of those refused before it. None of the physical or topographical issues from the previously rejected applications have been resolved. That this application should be rejected on the same grounds as the last and the previous one before that and the one before that as well. The entire neighbourhood, bar a few houses, whose owners would all gain from this development, object to this new application. Previously, the owners of 31A have been approached by their neighbours to find a solution, offering to purchase the land and extend everyone's gardens. Time and again, the owners of 31A have refused these proposals because they believe they will make more money from a developer. Ultimately, these proposed plans remain an undisputable case of inappropriate backland development in a small residential area where a number of properties already dealing with the impact and issues caused by a relatively high number of additional properties being added to the limited space already available. To approve this application would be to sanction private commercial gain to no benefit to the local community, which would not be justifiable given the serious nature of the unmitigated risks outlined above. I'm happy that my comments will be noted for the record, particularly around the oak trees, because if these proposals are accepted, I sincerely fear for their future. Sorry about the voice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dawes. We'll now move on to the officer presentation, which is going to be given by Juliet. Oh, sorry, Janine. Sorry, Janine.
Thank you. This is a full application for the construction of 3 detached bungalows with associated parking, amenity space and the creation of a new access from Beaufort Gardens. The site is situated to the rear of 31A Julian Court Road. The site is within a defined development boundary and has no specific allocation on the proposals map contained within the adopted local plan. As members will have seen in the committee report, planning permission has been previously refused on the site in 2017 for the erection of 4 two-storey dwellings with the access proposed between 31A and 33 Julian Court Road. This current scheme has proposed to move the access to Beaufort Gardens between the properties numbers 13 and 15. The scheme has also reduced to 3 single-storey dwellings. For the site context, 33 Julian Court Road is a Grade 2 listed, and the site is bounded by 8 residential properties. Julian Court Road is situated at an elevated level to the site, and the site currently is a mature garden. There are 2 large oak trees, which can be seen on the plan here and here. This is the proposed site plan. During the course of the application, the scheme has been reduced from 4 dwellings to 3. This was primarily to address the concerns raised by the Heritage Officer regarding the impact on the setting of the listed building. There is a 5.5 metre wide access proposed between numbers 13 and 15 with a size 3 turn area. This turn area was originally positioned to the north but has been moved to the south to address concerns by the tree landscaping officer regarding the root protection area to protect the oak tree. We can see there is also an area proposed to the north of the site as a landscaping area of ecological and biodiversity gain. The first 12 metres of the proposed access is tarmac, with the remaining part drive to be finished in a permeable gravel construction. The area to the front of the dwellings are proposed to be finished in permeable block paving. The green line on the plan is the existing public right-of-way. There are rumble strips proposed either side of the access as a traffic calming measure. There is a natural spring in the site, which is proposed to be retained. The lead local flood authority requested a high-level drainage strategy and a maintenance management strategy, which have subsequently been submitted and no objections raised. The proposed dwellings are situated over 30 metres from the adopted road, and this is considered to be a reasonable distance for prospective occupiers to take their bins for collection. It is proposed that the collection of waste will be provided by a private contractor, and an additional condition is proposed to impose requiring refuse management plan to be submitted to the council prior to the occupation of the development. This is the proposed floor plan and roof plan of plot 1, together with the elevations. The internal floor area is 128 square metres, meeting the current standards, and it will include a 2-bedroom dwelling with a single attached garage. The overall height to the ridge is 6 metres. Plot 2 is identical to plot 1 in terms of its size and layout. The appearance differs slightly with a rendered finish proposed. Plot 3. These are again similar to plot 1 and 2, however a double garage is proposed here rather than a single, and this is proposed to be finished in a red brick finish. And plot 3 is situated on the boundary with the listed building. The proposal requires the removal of 10 trees that have been given a C rating, 4 trees that have been given a B rating, and 3 that have been given a U rating. The 2 Category A oak trees are to be retained. This is a proposed landscaping plan with mitigation planting including beech and silver birch trees. The beech is the orange dots and the silver birch are the dark purple spots. The landscaping officer has been consulted and raised no objection to the proposal. In terms of site photographs, looking at the 3 presented, the top left photograph is taken in the approximate location of plot 3 looking northwards towards the proposed area of biodiversity. The bottom left is from Julian Court Road between 31A and 33, and the listed building is just visible on the right. The top photograph is taken looking southwards towards the boundary with the listed property, and we can see it's got an established vegetated boundary. The willow tree is also proposed to be retained. These are the photographs of the dilapidated structure which is situated on the boundary with the proposed dwelling on plot 3 and directly on the curtilage of the listed building. The Heritage Officer has suggested that this building does not have a heritage value on its own and does not contribute to the setting of the listed building. However, he did suggest that its reconstruction would preserve or enhance the setting. The applicant's intention is to remove this structure on safety grounds. Officers do not consider it reasonable to insist on rebuilding, as it does not directly contribute to the significance of this listed building. The top photograph on this slide is taken looking towards proposed access to the site, and the bottom is taken looking northwards towards the protected oak tree. These are photographs taken of the proposed access. In the top photograph we can see number 13 and just below is number 15. The access into the site is proposed between these two properties. We can also see the safety railings for the public right-of-way which dissects across the road. The public right-of-way is seen more clearly on these photos. In terms of the planning balance, there would be a loss of trees to facilitate the development. This does not weigh against the proposal. However, it is considered that any adverse impacts in relation to removal of lower quality tree can be mitigated through a planting and additional landscaping. In terms of public benefits, the site is within the development boundary in a sustainable location. It would also deliver 3 market dwellings and would provide economic and social benefits during the construction and following the occupation in supporting local facilities. To conclude, officers are recommending to grant planning permission subject to a number of conditions listed on this slide. We have concluded that the adverse impacts of granting permission do not significantly outweigh the benefits when assessed against policies in the framework taken as a whole. Consequently, it is recommended that planning permission is granted for the proposed development with the listed proposed conditions imposed. And just to note, there are 2 additional conditions, including the refuse management plan and also condition 22, whereby to ensure that the surface water drainage is in accordance with the management strategy and the surface water drainage report submitted and agreed with the Flood Risk Authority.
Thank you, Janine. Members. Councillor Mann.
Well, a question to start with. Has what has been said about the natural spring this evening had any impact at all upon the conclusions that officers have come to? Are they convinced that mitigation would be acceptable to the county councils as sort of lead flood agency?
Through you, Chair. Yes, we can confirm. Obviously, there was originally a hold and objection received. However, the applicant has worked with the council and Essex County Council for the flood risk, and they've submitted an updated management strategy and also a surface water drainage report, which is considered acceptable. And in reference to the sequential test, obviously this site is located within the development boundary. It is in a sustainable location, and therefore this is why we are recommending approval, but obviously subject to the additional condition to make sure it's in accordance with the up-to-date information.
Councillor Schwer.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask officers, although I understand from the presentation its sustainable location, could I just double check, because of the reference so much tonight with regards to flooding, I don't think it seems to me to be wise to choose tarmac on site. I would have thought it would have been better to have the opportunity to have better materials to mitigate the surface water and drainage.
Through you, the Chairman. It's just the first 12 metres that are tarmac, and the rest of it is permeable paving. So obviously that can be agreed by condition to ensure that it's permeable to allow the surface water drainage.
Thank you. Councillor Inchman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question regarding the public right-of-way. As the public speaker mentioned, it is an important access. It's not too far from where I live, and I've used that quite on a number of occasions. What will that look like once the development is completed, if the development is completed, and what alterations? Because I couldn't quite work out from the plans what that public right-of-way will turn into. Thank you.
So this is the, let me just check it's the right one actually, sorry. So this is a proposed site plan. So what they're intending to do is, they're intending to put rumble strips either side of the access as a traffic calming measure, but that detail would be agreed by condition, and it has been recommended by Essex County Council from their highways team. So it would just have, like when you see them in traffic calming measures within certain roads or streets, just to ensure that it's safely going in the access. But I haven't got any other up-to-date information, sorry.
Thank you. That would be Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Could the officer say a little bit more about where the spring goes? Is that the blue at the top of the proposed site plan? Is there some sort of feature there designed to take it? You said that it's going to be mitigated, but not actually told us where the water will physically go. Secondly, in regard to the loss of trees, although the officer said lower quality trees are being removed, 4 of them are B category, which are not lower category, and I'm concerned about the numbers. Could you, perhaps using that site plan, I don't know if it's possible, point out which ones are being removed and which ones are staying specifically? And thirdly, it's stated that, and residents have said that they've seen bats there, so I take it on face value there are bats there. It said there's a low risk of harm to bats. Well, I would have thought that removing almost the entire garden, most of the trees, and replacing it with built form, which will be lit, is a very significant risk to bats. Could the officer please explain that apparent discrepancy? Thank you.
If I can just come back to you on the drainage plan in a minute, and I'll try and address the other issues. So with respect to the ecology, within the report, if we deal with that matter first, I think it's from pages 21 to 22. Obviously, I note your comments with respect to the bats, and in 11.55, the ecology officer has raised no objections subject to mitigation measures, which include the installation of bat boxes, bird nesting boxes, bee insect boxes, and hedgehog-friendly fencing. So that's, in terms of addressing that concern, the ecology officer has raised no objection based on the report that was submitted for consideration with the application originally. In terms of the trees, I need to... Let me just bear with me a second. I'll just try and draw up a new plan.
Members, we're just going to try and find those two plans. That's the plan showing the location of the trees and also a plan showing a bit more detail about the drainage.
sorry about that. So in terms of the tree protection, the dashed lines are the trees that are seeking to be removed. And obviously the two oak trees are the T7 and T22. If that clarifies the position of where the trees are to be removed, I don't know if we can make that a little bit smaller. So as you can see, the blue ones are the category B and the grey ones are the category C. And as we said, there's 10 category C and 4 category B to be removed.
Councillor Abbott, is that clear enough for you to answer your question?
Not really. I never find these tree plans as clear as they should be. So the ones which are sort of faded, they're the ones that are all going?
Yes, that's right. So
the ones with the green circles and the dots in there staying?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Councillor, but we're just going to need to come back to you on the other point regarding the spring and the drainage.
I think, Madam Chairman, I think it is important because residents did raise it, and it's been said, well, it's being mitigated, but what does that mean in practice? I think that's the question. Thank you.
Yes, a fair comment, Councillor Abbott. And do any other members wish to raise any different points? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite concerned about the spring. I've got experience of a spring in gardens which caused considerable problems in later life to a particular bungalow. They can be very troublesome. They've been there for some time and probably will be for a long time. I don't think we've had a yet clear answer as to what's going to happen to them. And trees, certainly, I hate to see any trees cut down, particularly oaks, etc. Only today we've heard that it's been proved there's a far greater uptake of carbon from trees than ever possibly thought of. So yet we're losing yet more trees. It seems to happen every time we come to a planning meeting that trees are going. Thank you.
Any other members wish to? Can I just also add to a question of my own? This was one of the questions raised in public speaking, which is that the boundary, the tree boundary between Thorpe Lodge and 31A. Speaker has like to just address the point, the first point of Mr. Dawes about the boundary there is just shrubs rather than trees, and therefore not a very substantial boundary.
Thank you. We have got a landscaping condition imposed whereby we can ensure that significant planting is on that boundary to mitigate against the impact onto the neighbours.
Councillor Abbott, with apologies, despite best efforts, we're struggling to actually find the plan that annotates the location of the spring. It wasn't part of the presentation. It's not shown, I don't think, as an annotation on the site plan. So I don't want to mislead members over it. We'll continue looking, but I've gone through some of the documentation submitted in support of the application, but I can't actually see something that we can display on the screen to show the exact location.
Thanks. Well, it was that, and also where does the water go to? What is the actual physical means of dealing with the water that residents say emanates all the time?
So I think in terms of we are not, as the local planning authority, experts on this particular matter, which is why there's been that consultation with the Essex County Council Local Lead Flood Authority as the SUDS team. So for schemes of this nature, we would consult SUDS where a scheme is over 10 units or more. That's where their statutory obligations start to come in. But in terms of this type of application, we've consulted them on a lower threshold here because of the fact it's designated as a local critical drainage area, and because of this particular issue in relation to the spring. But they've considered the details of the mitigation that's been put forward, and they've deemed that to be acceptable. So from an officer perspective, it's very difficult to offer anything more for members this evening, other than we've consulted with the local lead flood authority on this matter, and they've raised no objections. In terms of the technical detail around that, I'm not sure I could explain that for members in detail this evening, on the basis that SUDS have agreed the maintenance and the strategy that's been put forward.
Councillor Mrs. Sprafe, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we seem to be a bit of a stalemate with this one. I appreciate it has been refused in the past, but this is a revised application. It's slightly different, so it has to be judged on those merits. I personally wouldn't favour refusal because we don't have objections from statutory consultees, but I do think we could possibly make a case for deferral whilst the issue of the spring and the likely flood situation is investigated. It does seem to me that there could be quite a strong case for deferring it and coming back with a bit more detail. So I would be happy to move deferral. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott, second. Thank you. Councillor Beavis, would you like to say anything else?
Thank you, Chairman. I was actually going to move deferment myself, so I will support Gabrielle Spray and Councillor Abbott. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too was going to second the deferral. I wondered if by means of education, it would be worth getting a bit more of a technical note around the spring drainage piece. Bearing in mind we are lay people, it might just help to inform the decision next time it comes to this committee and help us move forward. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Well, it has been moved and seconded that we defer this application to further consider the issue of the spring. All those in favour of deferral? Thank you, members. That is unanimous. So that application has been deferred. We'll now move on to the second application this evening, which is application number 22/01604/4, land adjacent to Dawes Hall, Henny Road, Lamarsh. We don't have any speakers on this application, so we will move straight to the presentation, which is going to be given by Carol. Thank you, members.
Good evening, members. This application is for erection of a new education and visitor centre for Dawes Hall. So you can see here, this is the location plan. There's currently existing education centre is located here. And the blue line includes the areas that, the blue line includes the whole areas that currently managed by Dawes Hall Charity Trust. And this is the proposal to replace the existing education centre and build a tailor-made education centre. The star is where the new centre will be located within the site. And this one shows the proposed layout plan. As you can see here, there will be a new vehicular access coming into the site. So existing, there's a hedgerow along the area, so part of it will need to be removed to facilitate the access, and then it will go further into the more central part of the site, and the new building will be proposed behind the mature trees. This plan shows the proposed floor plan. As you can see, it is a crescent-shaped building. It is single-story in height. There will be a bird height in the front of the building. The northern part of the building will be mainly used as a classroom. In the middle part of the building will be providing toilet and like courtroom area. And then the southern part of the building will be providing new office space, storage, and meeting areas for gardeners. And there will be also a small exhibition center in the middle. This slide shows the elevation. The top one shows the front of the building. This will be the view that you can see as you go into the site from the vehicular access. And in the middle will be the bird hive. And the lower one shows the eastern elevation. That will be the one that will be the side with the boardwalk on the edge, and students will be able to have the classroom on the right-hand side of the building here. This one shows the northern and southern elevations of the building. Here are some of the site photos. The top one shows the current hatch, roadside hatch along Henry Road. And the lower one shows the existing vehicular access to the existing building. As you can see, there's a very narrow vehicular entrance at the moment, which is quite a difficult entrance for any coach or minibus to arrive at the center. So the top photos here shows the listed building. This is Grade 2 listed building Dalton, which is currently used as residential use. It also shows the turning areas that any staff and visitor vehicles will need to turn over right in front of the listed building. And the lower photos here shows the area looking towards the existing vehicular entrance. Just slightly under the crown here is the existing car lodge, which is the existing education building. And further behind that is the listed building itself. These are more photos showing the existing situation of the site. As you can see, like surrounding the site, there's quite a lot of, and within the site, there's quite a lot of mature trees. The one on the right-hand side is part of the meadows that eventually, that will be where the building will be, and looking towards the eastern side. So the proposal, this is for purpose-built education and visitor centre together with office and storage space. This will, as I said earlier, it will replace the existing centre, which is not fit for any further conversion and extension. This proposal will allow expanded classroom space to cater for larger school visits. It will also provide office and storage space for the wider operation of the wildlife reserve. It will also provide a safer access and parking area for coach and minibus. It will allow the centre to hold visits in any weather. It will also allow improved access for disabled visitors to the centre. And more importantly, it will also release the existing car lodge back into the ancillary use for the listed building. The building itself is a single-story dual-pitch roof building with decking facing onto the eastern side. The longest measurement of the building is about 43 meters wide, and it's cover a floor area of about 312 square meters. So in terms of considerations, the site itself is located outside development boundaries. However, it's also fall within part of the local wildlife site designated on the local plan. It is within the setting of the Grade 2 listed building Dalton. The centre itself currently provides a mixed-use activities, and because of the mixed-use officers of the view that it does not fit entirely into a specific use class. So the applicant has quoted policy in relation to rural enterprise, rural tourism use, education establishment, and local community service. However, officers are of the view that the building itself does not fall entirely within one single use. So we are of the view that it is a mixed use combining all the uses here. And that's why officers consider that it's a sui generis use and it should be considered on its own. Following the consultation, there's no objection from technical consultees and there's no objection from the parish council. So in terms of assessment, officers has taken into account that because the site is located outside development boundaries, normally a brand new commercial building would not be permitted in this in an area like this. However, because the proposal will allow for expansion of an existing rural charitable business, and that will encourage more people to enjoy the intrinsic character of the rural countryside, this is regarded as a benefit. And there's a clear, defined functional link with the wider local wildlife site as well. No adverse harm has been identified, and because the proposal will also release the outbuildings to revert back into ancillary use of the listed building, is considered to be a beneficial point, and it will also separate any parking and vehicular turning arrangement to make them further away from the listed building, which again to be considered as a benefit. So on balance, it's considered that the proposal will provide a well-designed building respecting the countryside character, and it will also bring the economic and social benefit and helps delivering biodiversity net gain. So taking into account all the harms and benefit, is considered that there's enough material consideration to justify a granting of permission for this building. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Carol, for that presentation. Members, Councillor Mann.
Thank you for that report. I think it's very important to sort of lay out the context as you have done here and in the report, because ordinarily, if this was a pure commercial building in this very rural location, I don't think that we would be predisposed towards it. But this is sort of mixed use, and we can, I think, examine it in its merits, which I think are considerable. In the past, I have been sort of roped in with parties of primary school children to visit. So I know that the work that is done, the educational work that is done, which is significant. And I know there is a leisure function too. A lot of families sort of go there, and there are, as you say, no objections, and I can't see any identifiable harms from the report. So happy to move officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Final seconder, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll just say a few words. Yeah, lucky to have been here a couple of times myself as a primary school student and as a secondary school student. And I know that the work they do there is of great joy, not just across the district, but also beyond the boundaries into Suffolk as well. And I know that with this development, it will help to increase their stretch to include accessible access, special needs, and some sensory areas. It's a great part of the district, and as Councillor Mann has said, usually it would have given some cause for concern, but in this context, I think it's absolutely right to support the decision for recommendation, and I'm happy to second. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Does any other member wish to? Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I agree with that. I dabble a little bit myself with giving talks at schools on astronomy and wildlife and environmental issues, and always enjoy it. And obviously, this is on a much bigger scale So definitely support the principle. Some of the, we haven't mentioned it yet, but some of the sustainability features on the building are very good, which you know, is good to see. There's really only one nickel I've got, and it's not really a criticism. It's more a question of dotting I's and crossing T's. At paragraph 11.1.4, it talks about the potential impacts of all the glazing. Obviously, there's going to be lighting inside the building, which will spill outwards, but it said that will be dealt with by the opening hours. But then there's no conditions specifying what the opening hours are. There's a condition number, what is it, 10, that talks about construction, but not the actual opening hours. And I did look at some of the reps this afternoon, and there was a question mark there about the extent of use, you know, how many days a year and the hours. So I'm wondering if that could be defined. Apparently, I haven't seen it myself in the application, but apparently it says it'll operate till 8 o'clock in the evening. So I don't know if we can tie that up and specify it. Also, there is no general lighting condition, which there clearly should be on a building in a local wildlife site. Apart from that, I'm very much in favour of it, but if I could have clarification on that, I'd be grateful.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Abbas. Yes, we can include the conditions to restrict the opening hours. The applicant did indicate that it will open occasionally till 8 p.m. It's because sometimes they do provide photography activities. So sometimes it will have especially during the summer months, they will have late night activities. So that's why they say they need later evening hours, just to allow people finishing the event able to wrap up and to take their coats, things like that. But yeah, we can include condition just to specify the operation hours. In terms of lighting.
So, Councillor Abbott, apologies, just to clarify, so is the point of concern because of the design of the building, the amount of glazing in terms of light spill, so is your concern about the external lighting to the site or more about the internal, or is it in relation to both?
It's both, but I think the point I was picking up in paragraph 11.1.4, it says that the issue of the glazing spill would be covered by the hours, so I think that's effectively covered for effectively most of the period of the year when bats might be flying, which is obviously what I'm thinking about. But there is no actual general lighting condition on any. I would imagine there are going to be lights on the outside of the building, and given it's a local wildlife site, so the standard condition with the standard wording.
Yeah, so we could put absolutely. So we could put the standard lighting condition on. That's not a problem. So I just wanted to tease out the point because sometimes where you've got buildings with a large amount of glazing, it's then about the levels of lighting internally and the type of specification of the glazing. But as you say, the hours of operation will control that by default. So if we could add an additional condition for the hours linked with what's set out in the application submission, and then the general lighting condition, should members deem that to be acceptable, obviously.
Acceptable, Chair.
Could I just ask, in relation to the hours of opening, is the applicant only proposing to open during daylight hours?
It has not been specified. It sometimes depends on what community events they are holding as well. So they just say for the year they want the opening hours to be until 8 p.m. the latest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So could I just clarify what additional condition then you are proposing?
So we'd have Thank you, Councillor Parker. So we'd have two additional conditions. So there'd be a condition which we would just need to work out the wording for to control the hours of opening. And there'd be a second condition which would be the standard lighting condition to require details of new external lighting for the site to come forward for approval, and it would have the standard wording in about in order to protect biodiversity and so forth.
Acceptable to move that.
And Councillor Ritchie?
Sorry, just a very brief point. On their website, one of their events is a What's That Bat, which finishes at about 9 o'clock at night. So we think we need to be off some flex on what their opening hours should be.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. So just on that point then, it might be more appropriate, rather than set out what they've included, which is 8 p.m. in the application submission, the wording of the condition we could do is that the applicant should come forward with their proposed hours of opening, which would allow possibly them to specify specific events like that where they would enable them to open for a longer period of time. So we could cover that by condition to require them to submit those details for approval if that would be preferable. So that's the alternative we could do.
Do any other members wish to make any comments on this application? Okay, well, it has been moved by Councillor Mann and seconded by Councillor Ritchie that we grant this application. All those in favour? Thank you, members. That application has been granted subject to the additional conditions. We'll now move on to the next application, which is application number 22/2283/full, land north of Colchester Road, Witham. And we do have a speaker this evening, who's Mr. Lee Melvin, who is the agent. Thank you.
Good evening. It's actually Lee Melvin and Merlin, the usual mispronunciation.
Apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. My name is Lee Mellon. I'm a director of Stratton Parker, and we act as the applicant's planning consultant. The application before you today is the result of extensive pre- and post-application discussions with council officers and statutory consultees. As set out in the officer's report, the application site benefits from extant planning permissions for the construction of 2 buildings for industrial and storage uses. These existing consents provide for some 32,000 square metres of space in buildings with maximum heights of 15.5 to 20 metres. The current proposals reduce the overall site coverage of the buildings to just under 26,000 square metres and the maximum building heights of 13 to 14 metres. The proposed buildings have been designed to address the specific needs of 2 global logistics companies, both of whom currently have their head offices in Witham. The proposals would enable both firms to expand their businesses to meet ongoing demand whilst retaining their head offices within Witham and Braintree. Once completed, the buildings will provide some 350 jobs. The application site is designated for employment use in the adopted local plan and benefits from extant permissions for buildings of a similar scale and design. The principle of this form of development in this location has therefore been established. The proposals would retain high-quality jobs within the district and the opportunity for new jobs to be created. The new buildings would also secure the long-term head office functions of 2 global players in the logistics industry within Witham. The extensive work undertaken in consultation with officers and consultees has addressed all of the matters raised during the life of the application. The proposed conditions would ensure that the buildings would meet a high standard of design and sustainability. Officers are content that permission can now be issued, and on behalf of the applicant, I respectfully request that the application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mellon. Now move to the officer presentation, which is going to be given by Matthew. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. So the proposal before you this evening, as has been said at public question time, is the erection of 2 B8 storage and distribution units with associated office space and infrastructure. And we're looking at the site land north of Colchester Road in Witham. So the site measures 6.8 hectares and is adopting the local plan for B8 storage use for distribution. Just by way of context, many of you hopefully will know it. So it's the existing Eastways. Sorry about that. So just as context, so you've got the railway line to the north, the existing A12 to the south, and you've obviously got the existing Eastways development, and then to the east you have existing arable field. So yes, the site has got 2 previously extant consents, and members will be aware of these as they came to committee last year. I've sort of quite crudely shown what the 2 red lines were on the plan. So the first one was this one, which was the application by PFE, and then the other one was in blue, which is the Aquila site, which also included the demolition of Brawley Brook Farm, as you can see down there. The site contains a number of established trees and hedgerows. I thought this would be best illustrated by a site plan. Most of the trees are category B, which is moderate value, or category C, low quality. But there is a category A oak tree in the middle, which is approximately around here. The aerial image also is up to date in that it shows the Bellway development on the other side of the railway. I've just got some photos before I show you what's proposed, just to give you some more context. So the site is proposed to be accessed from Eastways, and this is the proposed access point in between the PFE building and the other building. So the site access is here, and you're looking at the row of trees, which are the category B trees behind the PFE building. And I've slightly just panned out a little bit just to show you the extent of that tree group, and also you can see the A12 in the distance. So I've sort of gone up into the site, so more northerly, so you can see the railway, and quite timely the train going past as well. In terms of where that is, this is one of the top parcels of the site, looking across, looking eastwards. And then I've gone to the other side of this particular parcel and looked back to the west. I've had to brighten the picture up a little bit. But the railway line's on the right, and the A12 is quite far on the left. So looking east, so you can see the 2 oak trees which are outside the site, which are to be left, and then some of the existing outbuildings that are associated with Brawley Brook Farm. Then this is the sort of other corner of the site, so the A12 is just to my left, looking back across the site, so you can see the railway line again, well-placed train going past. And then you've got the belt of trees in the middle of the site and the oak tree. And then obviously you can just about see the other trees that I referred to earlier. And then I walked all the way out to the other side so I could take it from the A12, and it's basically showing the same thing, just a slightly different perspective. And then I just wanted to include a photo from the middle of the site showing what I believe is the oak tree, the category A oak tree. If you haven't seen it, you've probably seen it on the A12. This property is this Brawley Brook Farm, which is to be demolished, as I've said. And then this is just looking back across at the site. So they're the 2 oak trees that I mentioned earlier that are outside on the arable field, and that's sort of the edge boundary to the site. This is now the other side of the railway. As you can sort of see, it runs along. Just looking back towards the development site. As you can see, you can't really see it too much at eye level. And then another one just further up the footpath. Well, just took the photo a bit further down. This bit's a bit further up where some of the other dwellings are, and you can see it's obviously quite planted and quite screened. Okay, right, so appreciate, probably can't see so on that too well, so I'll take you through it. But I just wanted to give members an understanding of the A12 widening scheme and what the impact is on this site, because obviously, if you've read the report, which I'm sure you have, it will have a big implication on the bottom part of the site. So the yellow is land in the A12 order limits, which is effectively what their red line is. So you can see that order limit does actually eat into the red line of the site at the bottom, but also for services along part of the site going into Eastways itself. So it's proposed that the new A12 carriageway is further south, you can see, so the site would actually be adjacent to what would be effectively a raised roundabout and a feeder road. The blue is the existing alignment of the A12, just for comparison purposes. So you can see it is if approved, it would be realigned. So as we'll see, the development has taken into account the land required for national highways. So that shouldn't prejudice that scheme, and certainly national highways are okay with the proposal. And I think also it's worth noting that there is a construction compound proposed on the arable land. We were just looking at where those 2 oak trees were. Okay, so this the proposed site plan. So it's split into 2 halves. So you've got the PFE building that they're proposing. So the existing one's over here. They're proposing to move to this building's purpose-built building. It's got service yards on either side with the parking at the front, and then you've got the service yard for the Aquila building at the rear, and you can better see that the land at the bottom, which has been left at this time for national highways, and you can see the car parking is slightly different as well. As set out in the report, the applicant has proposed a footway cycleway link as a possibility, and that's kind of shown here. As set out in paragraphs 11.4.13, page 88, officers are not recommending this cycleway for approval, as there's no guarantees at this stage that it would actually connect to the new footway cycleway that will be provided by the A12 scheme. We're going to try and secure it through the Section 106 to have a scheme come forward, because obviously it would be a benefit if it can be delivered, but there's no guarantees that it could be, and it's not shown on the Highways England plan that's been submitted to the Planning Inspectorate. So yeah, at the moment we can't give it any weight, but certainly we want to have the link, and we're putting mechanisms in place to try and secure it. The landscaping plan, so I think it's probably worth at this point saying that pretty much the majority of all existing trees and hedges at the site would have to be removed to facilitate the development. Instead, the developer is looking at replanting a high density landscape scheme. So you've got 2 new oak trees or something similar, of a similar kind of category at the front, which seeks to address the loss of the category A oak tree. And then you've got trees in some of the car parking spaces, in tree pits. I think looking at this plan, it can only be said that the overall landscaping space is limited compared to the extent of the proposed development. But I do think the high density tree stock will help mitigate this to some extent. The issue with high density tree stock is that it's quite hard to establish. So an irrigation scheme has been provided in principle, which gives officers greater assurance that what actually is being proposed would actually be delivered and last. Often it's covered by the landscape condition to replace planting, but if you try and front load it at the outset to make sure that it's retained, then obviously that's a benefit to the scheme longer term. And I think it's probably worth noting, anyone that's been to the Eastways development as existing, this would be an improvement on what is there currently. So just in terms of the A12 widening scheme, so I showed you what the implications of that was. The service yard, so once the A12 works are complete, the service yard is proposed to be extended out, which is that sort of orangey plan. And then the green is areas of landscaping, which are proposed to be included again. So in order to, because of the time scales involved, obviously the developer wants to get on and build, if approved, the buildings without having to wait for the A12. So we're proposing that it's phased. So the first phase would obviously be the buildings, and the second phase in green would be the lands that would be returned to the developer by National Highways at a later point, obviously when the project's complete, or indeed the land's no longer necessary. So you've got two sort of stages there, so that make sure that we get details like landscaping, etc., and levels, so that they can come forward at the right time. And I think I'll just include this as well, just as a very quick comparison. So the previous two permissions were both outlined, so they had maximum parameters. These plans give an indication of what the maximum parameters of those buildings could have been, which provided by the developer. As you can see, that the buildings there's more of them, albeit they were smaller generally. The service yards would have been quite a bit smaller. And I think it's worth noting as well, this scheme did try, where possible, to retain some of the existing features on the site, but I understand this scheme is no longer able to be delivered and doesn't meet what the applicants need it to, or developer needs it to, in terms of commercial, in terms of how the commercial world will operate and how the businesses operate. And then you've got the sections which show the difference in land levels across the site, which is something that the developers had to grapple with. So the the railway and the A12, and I've just zoomed on the estate road, so you can see that the PFE building on the right is going to be at a higher level than the Aquila building on the left, and obviously there's retaining walls and structures that are going to be needed. I think the developer has committed to reducing the amount of earthworks as far as possible, and I think that's evident with the service yard, which is actually lower than the building. You can sort of just about see it, which would require dock levelers to put the cargo up into the building. So just quickly flicking through the elevations. So this is the one to the internal spine road for the PFE building, and then to the railway boundary. The railway boundary elevation officers are not particularly as happy with as they could be. Certainly the front elevation is contemporary with the glazing. The side elevations are better because they have more visual interest with the docking bays. The office space is 3-storey, which is in that contemporary space, as I've said. The larger Aquila building was changed, so it was similar to the previous, the PFE building, but this building has actually got some cladding on it now to provide visual interest, to help break up what otherwise would have been quite a monotonous elevation. So officers are now satisfied that this building is adequately designed. And the office space for this building is only 2-storey. So in terms of some illustrations that have been provided, the tree stock shown is obviously quite extensive, and it's obvious that the planting proposed would take some time to get to those kind of heights, if at all, but it does give you a flavour of what the development could look like in the future. So just a very quick run through then of the benefits and the harms for your consideration in making the decision. So it is an allocated site in the adopted local plan and does benefit from 2 previous consents. There's significant economic and social benefits, approximately 350 new jobs, retention of PFE and another business based in Whittingham in the district, potentially. The site is in a sustainable location. It's in Whittingham, one of the key main towns. There is new landscaping proposed with irrigation. There is above building regulations sustainability credentials, including solar panels and ground source heat pumps. And it's worth noting that it wouldn't prejudice the wider A12 widening scheme. But against that, the proposal would result in loss of nearly all of the vegetation on the site, including the Category A oak tree. The scale of development is significant, leaving less space for landscaping, which obviously would have better mitigate the visual effects, albeit the high density stock will do that to a greater extent than normal stock. There are sort of habitat units on the site which can only be provided elsewhere. Additional vehicle movements, albeit less than previously consented, so very limited impact. The potential for increased noise and reduction in air quality, but again, it's an industrial site, industrial location, so furthest residential dwelling is far away. And then obviously, as I said, the loss of the one dwelling on the site previously consented. And then weighing all of those things up in the planning balance, officers came to the view that the benefits would outweigh the harms on balance, and therefore have recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and Section 106 agreement. I'd like to just propose that if my members are minded to approve, that condition 24 is updated, just to reflect some better wording. It's basically saying the same thing about requiring some noise assessment, but it's just making sure it meets the condition tests. And then the heads of terms, just briefly, obviously this is set out in the report, but the open space contribution of 109,000, the travel plan monitoring fee, securing biodiversity net gain off-site. At this time, we still haven't reached an agreement on what the site is, but we would secure it in any case through the Section 106 agreement, so members can have some comfort that that would be provided and secured. And then the provision of a footway cycleway scheme, which I haven't listed because it's quite a lengthy heads of term, but if you want to go through that, then that's okay, we can do that. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for that very detailed report on what's a very complicated application. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I may take a few minutes because this is a massive proposal. The officer said it's an improvement on what's there now, or what's there now is the countryside. I think what's important is on page 101 of the report, where the officer says the planning balance is relatively fine on this. And so I think what I'd say to members is it's not a foregone conclusion this is granted, and I'm going to set out why I think we should refuse this application. The first thing to say is that every single tree and hedge plant on this site within the red line will be destroyed. Every single one. And that includes the bunding that was provided for the existing northeastern boundary of the Eastways estate. Now, the officer, when he showed that, didn't actually say specifically, but he showed a photograph. That entire bund and all that planting, which over several decades has grown up, is going to be destroyed. That. So are the ancient hedgerows within the sites. Now, I won't list them all, but I spent some time this afternoon looking at the tree report from the developers. There are 17 native species of tree on the site and 2 non-native. I won't go through all the list, but the losses are catastrophic. That's the only word I can use, catastrophic. It's stated in here, amazingly, that most of the trees are over 20 years old, and one, it says, is over 40 years old. Well, that very distinctive dogleg hedge in the middle, I can remember as a boy seeing from the train coming home from Colchester. So that would have been 1972. I've spoken to the granddaughter of the person who owned the original Mott's Farm, and she says she remembers that hedge there then. The hedges in this book, written by Helen Pitchforth, a former member of this council, called A Hidden Countryside, and she believes that hedge is part of the original separated portion of Witham Parish. Which brings me on to this. There's been no assessment as to whether the hedgerows can be classed as protected and important. I believe they can be. They meet all the criteria in terms of age, species numbers, used for agriculture or near an agricultural site at least 20 metres long. And the two criteria which would make it an important hedge, which I think does need looking into, is whether it marked part or all of a parish boundary that existed before 1850, and whether it's part of a field system that existed before 1845. I couldn't see any reference to whether that had been investigated by the applicants. It is clearly a very old hedge. We know that from the species mix and the fact it's been there as long as it has. A member earlier this evening mentioned about how important it is to retain existing trees. If tonight this is granted and this entire site is destroyed, I will lose all faith in this council's ability to uphold its own policies. The previous application, I thought we'd done quite well in that we retained, there was a principle to retain most of the trees on the site. In fact, it says that on page 74 of the report. Previous applications, the principle of vegetation retention where possible was established. So we've gone from that to destroying every single plant on this site. That's quite a remarkable change. So in terms of policy, it would be contrary to paragraph 131 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which says existing trees shall retain wherever possible. Clearly this doesn't do it compared to the previous scheme, which did retain most of the trees. Officers themselves raised concerns. If you go and drill down into the detail of what the officers from landscaping and ecology said back to the officers, the planning officers, they said they were concerned about the scale and the density of the development, leaving very little room for landscaping. So we're going to lose that beautifully planted bund with those fantastic trees all the way along, which currently separates this land from the existing eastways. That's going to be completely gone and have a much narrower strip where Bergybrook Farm is currently. And by the way, I mean, there's no great love lost with Bergybrook Farm going. I would have to say the building is not in the best condition. So I'm not arguing here that this site won't be developed at some point. I'm arguing that this is the wrong development. These are enormous buildings. I would imagine they would probably be the biggest buildings in Witham, bigger than anything else on the existing industrial estates. They completely failed to take any design nod or size nod from the existing Eastways estate. And I can't see anywhere in the report where it actually references the fact this is going to be on the edge of the countryside. It's going to be right next to the edge of the green buffer that separates Witham. This land used to be in Rivenhall Parish, it's now in Witham, from Rivenhall End. So you're going to have these two enormous buildings as you come down the A12, which I doubt would ever be mitigated in terms of planting due to their scale. I think at the highest they're something like 15, 16 metres high. They are really colossal buildings. And the very fact that we've gone from where we were to this proposal, as I say, leaves very little space for adequate landscaping. There's also a cumulative impact. So in this area, in the last few years, we've had the development of Coleman's Quarry on the other side of the A12, which has removed nearly all the trees and hedges, removed large numbers of trees in Little Braxton Lane, which is a protected lane for the access. We've had removal of trees at the former Fox Public House, which I did raise with BDC, but they didn't seem too interested. And we're going to have mass removal of trees from the A12 development, which we're asking National Highways to mitigate as much as possible, but that will be more tree removal. Cumulatively, the change to this area is absolutely colossal. So, all in all, Madam Chairman, I think this we can refuse this. And a further point, of course, is the design, which officers themselves have said is not ideal. In the report at page 81, one of the buildings is described as bland, and officers were asked for the elevation to be amended, but the developer wouldn't do it. We've got, as well as the National Planning Policy Framework background to refuse this, we've also got at least 4 new local plan policies. So LPP 63 on the natural environment, this fails to protect any natural environment. LPP 65 sets out to protect established trees. It destroys every single tree on the site. LPP 66 says protection of biodiversity. It destroys all biodiversity on the site. And LPP 67, which I don't think officers have really covered enough, is the enormous scale of these buildings we have on the landscape. In terms of the age, as I say, we don't know exactly how old these trees are, but the tree reporting saying that they're all 20 years old plus, and in one case 40 years old plus, is clearly not accurate. The ecology report, this is the developer's own ecology report, found there were 4 species of bats on this site. Well, they're going to go, and that in itself is a criminal offence, actually. There is no chance that bats will be retained on this site, given that the entire centre area is going to be developed. It's very unlikely that they'd forage in amongst the buildings because they're going to be lit. And by the way, we don't even have a lighting report. How have we got to the stage where something this massive has not come to committee with a lighting report? So we don't know what they're going to put there. Potentially bats might survive on the far northeastern side, but I would say it's very unlikely they'd stay on the site. So we've got multiple reasons to refuse this. And in terms of biodiversity, we have a net loss of 52%. And the best we've got in front of us is that, well, they might find somewhere else to do it, to put biodiversity gain back in. That's just not good enough. This local authority says it prides itself on ecology, on tree planting, on sustainability. This proposal is not it. So for all those reasons, Madam Chairman, and I think there's more than enough, I propose refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. So Councillor Abbott has moved that we refuse this application. Does that find a seconder? Okay. So we don't have a seconder on that. Would anybody, other members, like to speak on this application? Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I would agree that this is not probably the most straightforward application that we've ever had for a number of reasons, but it is an allocated employment site in our adopted local plan. It's an allocated site. Councillor Abbott called the tree loss catastrophic. I would say it's very regrettable that you have to lose trees, but it is accepted, and this applies to both residential and commercial development, that trees sometimes have to go in order for a development to go ahead, as long as that development is acceptable. And I would say this is. There are no statutory objections, including from the landscape team. The Town Council have said they are in favour. It will provide, I believe, around 350 new jobs. Now, trees are important. They are important, and this authority knows that they are, but so are jobs, and we need jobs. We need to bring jobs into the district. I do think that the applicant has worked quite hard with officers, and I thank Matt very much for his presentation because it's quite a complex scheme. I think they've worked quite hard to achieve the best that they can from this. So for me, all in all, I think this is acceptable. I agree that it's not perfect, but it ticks a lot of boxes in terms of what this district wants to and needs to achieve. And I say again, it's an allocated employment area. So on that basis, Chairman, I will move approval. I'll move officer's recommendation.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Schwer.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go over all of the good points, or what I consider good points that Councillor Spray has made, but I'd just like to also make a few points. I do think it is regrettable that the trees are going, but I think in order to accommodate global companies in an allocated site is important as well for employment, not just of those people that are working there, but actually for the prosperity of Braintree District generally, and the amount of benefits that will bring to the economy over a period of time is really important. And I wish to address biodiversity net gain. It is very feasible and actually quite straightforward now to have a net gain off-site, because there is the Blackwater farmer clusters, and there are a considerable amount of farmers and landowners who wish to offer land for biodiversity net gain. And I think this is a very important planning application from that point of view for the district, so that that everyone is aware that that facility is important. And I do hope that the developer will offer more than the 10% net gain, taking into account the potential removal of those trees. So it would be good if it was up into the 15, 20, but certainly more than the minimum of 10% would be most welcome. And this will have that benefit of encouraging a greater concentration of wildlife in good areas, because don't forget, not only is it an allocated site, but it's potentially right next to the expansion of the A12, where we're going to have noise. We've already got industrial lights spilling out. We've also got industrial noise from there as well. And the important thing is it's far better to build biodiversity net gain off-site and have a much bigger area and add to the improvement of species, whereas there, I think it will be difficult. So I've addressed that, and also I do congratulate officers and the developer coming forward, because I have been mentioning for several years now about the quality of the industrial building. The design I won't go into, but actually the build standard of BREEAM is what we want with regards to sustainability. The fact that it's having ground source air heat pumps plus solar panels is taking a really responsible way of industrial space going forward. And this is a little bit on the cutting edge of what is also on Horizon 120, and I do welcome that in this really established industrial area of Witham. And I think for all of those reasons, including the reasons that Councillor Spray made, that I'm very happy to second this.
Thank you, Councillor Schrier. Councillor Mann and then Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. I associate myself with what Councillor Spray said, and particularly it is a local plan site, it's allocated, it's for employment, and it would have the benefit of anchoring two very significant local firms and creating 350 jobs. And you've got to give a lot of weight to that. It is finely balanced. You can find a number of demerits in the plan, but there are in the proposal, but there are a significant number of pluses, and that tips my balance of the evidence in favour of, I think, granting permission, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll just very briefly add my comments. It was mentioned that this authority prides itself on a number of things. One of those things is life chances for our communities through employment, and 360 jobs in Witham, in an industrial area, I think is a very welcome addition to what we've got to offer in the district. Therefore, I will be supporting this. It's got extended permission on it as well, so therefore the benefits that will be brought forward by approving this application will be huge for Witham. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, members. I just have a couple of questions myself, if I may. First of all, could I just clarify the view of the railway boundary, the building, the smaller building, as viewed from the other side of the railway boundary? I think I'm right in thinking that there is some woodland between the new railway site and the railway, and therefore it won't be seen to such an extent from that residential development. If you could just clarify that question for me. I think it is regrettable that there is not going to be the limited landscape ability to have landscape planting on the on the northern side of the site. If that's the correct direction, northeastern side of the site. It's a shame that one can't acquire some land on that field to increase the level of planting along that site. Although it's obviously outside the red line. So I do have some sympathy with that concern, which I think has been expressed by officers as well. The other point I just wanted to pick up, I know that highways haven't raised an objection, but clearly there is a problem with traffic exiting Eastways, well, certainly as perceived by the existing businesses on there. So I do hope that some mitigation can be looked at in the future on that, although it's obviously not an objection from highways for purposes of this application. Could I just also ask, Councillor Abbott raised the point about lighting and whether there was a lighting design proposed. Could you just address that point, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Just give me 1 second just to quickly flick through the proposed conditions. Okay, sorry, there's lots of conditions. Condition 29 and condition 30 relate to a lighting design scheme to protect amenity, nighttime landscape and biodiversity. So the condition 29 is about the phase 1, which is the main buildings, and then the condition 30 is the phase 2, which is where obviously the service yard will be extended once the A12 works are completed. Providing that goes ahead. I think your other question was about the landscaping on between the development up here, the new development and the railway and the site. As you can see, there is some landscaping there. When I went on site, I couldn't see the site. You might be able to just about see the building once it's built. I mean, there are large buildings. This building in this location does go up to 15.25 metres, I think, in terms of the parapet, but the actual structure is slightly less than that. But it is screened. You won't really see it. I think there are points you raised were just sort of for information, but if I've missed anything, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just also just clarify with mover and seconder that you're happy to accept the amendment to condition 24?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, members. Any other member wish to add anything new? Okay, in that case, it has been moved by Councillor Spray and seconded by Councillor Schreer that we grant this application. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Thank you, members. That application has been granted. Members, we'll now move on to the next application, which is application 22/00787 REM, land at the airfield, Earlscombe. We do have a speaker on this application, who's Mr. Ben Hobbs, on behalf of the applicant. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Vice Chair and councillors. Before I start, I should just note that Malcolm did want to talk tonight, but he missed the deadline to register. But in short, I think he just wanted to wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. My name is Ben Hobbs and I'm a director at Hobbs Estates. I'm the third generation to work within our family business based at Earlscombe Business Park. You may recall that I spoke here at a committee held in October when our application for the northern phase of this site was unanimously approved. Firstly, I'd like to note our sincere appreciation for this committee's support of that application, which will now result in a very positive impact on the local economy. The majority of tenants on the business park are SMEs who employ local people and trade with other local businesses. Being an SME ourselves, we are not your typical commercial landlord. More typically, commercial landlords tend to be larger, publicly listed companies. As a small family business, our advantage is not having to answer to shareholders, and so we can spend what we want on things like upkeeping the landscape and the environment that we have created. The disadvantage is our balance sheet is not comparable to these larger corporate bodies, and as a result of this, we have to be more considered when it comes to costs of construction projects such as materials. We have worked hard to ensure that the design you see before you is something that meets the aspirations of the council, whilst also making sure our construction costs stay at a level that keeps the project viable for us as a small family business. We have significantly altered our original proposals and hope that you will be as pleased with the final result as we are. It would be remiss of us not to thank Janine Rowley and Chris Padgey in the planning team for helping guide us to the final design, and also for recognising the constraints that we have as a business, as well as the site-specific constraints that we faced. Planning approval for this reserved matters application will enable us to sign a pre-approved construction contract, which will ultimately provide a further 45,000 square feet of employment space for the district. It is estimated that around 1,400 people are employed at the business park, and there is an opportunity to create upwards of 150 new jobs through this development. David Watson Transport are ready to move into what will be known as Albemarle House, and we have had inquiries about the new 30,000 square foot Fortress House premises too. I would also like to point out that the development is extensively landscaped, with the planting plan being considerate towards biodiversity. Across the whole site, we will be planting over 10,000 trees and shrubs, including native hedge mixes and half an acre of wildflower seed. The two buildings are designed to be highly energy efficient and will have an EPC rating of A. They also both include solar panels on the roof, further reducing their carbon impact and benefiting future occupiers with reduced energy costs. I would like to finish by encouraging all councillors to agree the planning officer's recommendation and vote in favour of approving the application for the reasons I've just outlined. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. No further speakers, so we'll now move to the presentation, which is going to be Janine. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a reserved matters application in respect to layout, scale, appearance, access and landscape, pursuant to the outline permission granted in 2017 for the erection of 10,220 square metres of B1, B2 and B8 floor space, and a subsequent application in 2021 which sought to vary the finished heights of the buildings located in this area. The reserved matters application solely relates to the southern parcels of the site for two buildings providing B8 floor space. Previously, under application 2100396 REM, which was brought to committee earlier this year, it has already been previously considered acceptable to have external storage in this location. But this application solely relates to the two B8 uses. The proposed buildings are located within an employment area as set out within the local plan and in line with the outline consent and employment policies. As you can see from the site block plan, the site would include unit 35 to the north, with the haulage parking to the front and staff and visitor parking. This is the staff parking, and there will be cycle provision also. This will be accessed from the northern access road, which is the main access road into the site. Millbank, the area highlighted in grey, as I said previously, there was a permission granted earlier this year for all this area to be external storage, but this does not form part of this application and will be brought forward at a later date. As highlighted within the main report, through the submission of revised plans, this has improved the overall quality of the proposed development in terms of the additional measures for elevations and landscaping to accommodate the concerns raised within the report by officers. No adverse impacts have been identified on highway grounds, and the provision of the access is deemed acceptable. There would also be no harm arising to the neighbouring residential amenity, environmental health, ecology or flooding issues by reason of the layout. As you can see from this roof site section, although it's quite small actually, sorry, the buildings proposed would actually be no higher than what's already on site. This is a CGI of how Unit 35 to the north of the site would look like, and obviously you can see the access road here, and this would be Unit 37. The appearance of the two buildings has been subject to extensive discussions, and following engagement with the agent, amendments have been made to the elevational treatment, which has improved with greater articulation, increased glazing, canopy detailing to the main entrances, and use of more contemporary materials, which comprises of a number of cladding variations and colours to break up the overall form and massing to both of the buildings. And this approach mirrors the modular building, which was brought before committee in October this year. As you can see, these are the elevations and the floor plan for Unit 37, and the same for Unit 35. In terms of the landscaping, the existing tree bund to the west and southern boundary, as part of the Section 106 agreement of the outline consent, will continue. During the course of the application, following discussions with the applicant, greater landscaping has been achieved, with additional planting between car parking spaces to break up the extent of hard standing, and to the southwest corner and southern boundary adjacent to Unit 37, enhancing the overall appearance of the site and relating to the existing landscape boundaries of Earlscombe Business Park. The following photos provide some context. So this is the main access into the site for vehicles coming from the north. This is the location of Unit 35 looking north and looking south. And this is the location of Unit 37. And this would be the access road for members of staff attending to Unit 37 from the east. To summarise, the site is located within a designated employment area, and this proposal is for two B8 storage units, which would be in line with the outline consent and adopted local planning policies, delivering economic and social benefits to the local community consistent with the MPPF. The layout, scale, appearance and landscaping would enhance the overall character and appearance of the area. No adverse impacts on the proposed development have been identified in terms of impact onto highway, residential amenity, ecology or flooding, and there are a number of conditions proposed to mitigate against any potential harm. No objections have been received from statutory technical consultees, and therefore the proposal is acceptable to officers and recommended to grant planning permission subject to conditions.
Thank you, Jean. Members, Councillor Spray.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is in my ward. Thanks very much to Janine for the presentation. I know that the applicant has been a little frustrated at times. I felt this has, taken a while to get to committee, but I do think it's important to note that both they and officers have worked very hard to achieve a good level of design and layout here for this scheme. and I'm pleased that Mr. Hobbs, Ben Hobbs, mentioned Janine and Chris in his statement. Janine, I know, has been involved as the lead officer on this right from the start, and they have worked hard on it. I do acknowledge, because it's in the report, that there remain some aspects of design which I think officers were not 100% happy with, but they acknowledge that the applicant has moved quite a long way in order to meet those concerns, and that they felt they have done, you know, as much as they could to get to this stage. There are some real positives for this, not least 10,000 trees and shrubs to be planted. I'm quite sure Councillor Abbott would have been happy to hear that if he stayed in the meeting, but he's left, unfortunately. But that's good. And, you know, we know the business park locally is very much valued for the employment it provides and what it adds to the community. And it is a source of employment for the whole district, not just for the immediate surrounds of Earlscombe Zone. 150 new jobs we think will be created, so that's very good to hear. So overall, yeah, I welcome this, and I'm happy to move officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Is that fine? Second, Councillor Schwitt.
Yes, happy to second that.
Would you like to make any comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to make some comments. I think this Reserve Matters actually shows eventually how collaboration between officers and the applicant has resulted in a better design. And as Councillor Sprace said, I understand sometimes the frustrations and length of time that the planning application comes through. But I think, again, rather like buses, you don't see one for ages and suddenly two come along, because I welcome, again, that the applicant and the Reserve Matters is building these industrial units on this well-established industrial but very well-landscaped park to very high standards, where, again, we've got high levels of insulation, which means sustainability. We've also got solar panels, which, again, will help with the cost of running this business, and, of course, not forgetting the potential new jobs. So, again, the increased amount of biodiversity net gain, including the half-acre wildflower, the amount of volume of trees planted, I think this is really important. Not only from the point of view of the potential for jobs, but for the companies that are working there, but also this is contributing really well to air quality, the wildlife that's around, and actually just for people visually working there. And I think this is really important. I think it's a good example of what potentially can be achieved with good planning, good design, good biodiversity, good wildflower, and also high insulation. So it's beginning to come together, and I'm really pleased because I'm able to speak in favour of this tonight, because for 2 years or more, as I said earlier, I have often made comments about we need to get our commercial buildings up to the standard. So it's really great tonight to see 2 planning applications come forward with all of these considerations. So I'm happy to make those comments. Thank you.
Any other member wish to make a contribution? All right. Yes, Christos wants to make a...
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Apologies, members. Just for completeness, Janine showed the site location plan just in terms of introducing the scheme. There was something that we had noticed just in relation to the site in the middle. There's a further slight amendment that just needs to be made to that particular plan. So the plan reference will change post-committee if members were minded to approve the application. It's just to make absolutely clear that the site in the middle, and Janine, apologies, yeah, if you could just put your cursor there on that one, thank you, that the site in the middle is clearly cut out from the current application. The issue, if members are minded to approve the Reserve Matters application this evening, is, and the advice that we've given to the applicant, is that it would be necessary to come forward with a new application effectively for the middle site for the open storage, because you've got an issue about overlapping consents potentially. So we just want to make sure there's no ambiguity going forward that effectively that site would slot in effectively to the area within this application. So it's more of a technical point, but there was just something we feel just needs some further refinement on the plan. It doesn't change the nature of what members are considering this evening, but just for completeness, Madam Chairman, I just thought I'd mention. Thank you.
Councillor Spray, I presume you're happy with that?
Yes,
Councillor
fine.
Schreer? Okay. So it has been moved and seconded, moved by Councillor Spray, seconded by Councillor Schreer, that we grant this application. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. We'll now move on to the next application, which is application number 22/02600/VAR, Apple Tree Farm, Polcat Road in Cressing. And we do have a speaker this evening for that application, is Mr. Patrick Thomas, who is the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. My name is Patrick Thomas, Senior Planning Manager at Inland Homes. Some members may recall the original application coming before the committee in September 2019, with the permission being granted in February 2020. Since then, Inland Homes have commenced on site in the face of a challenging global pandemic and labour shortages. During construction, a number of decisions were made that have led to some inconsistencies with the planning approval. I would like to apologise to the committee for this, and I am pleased to say that the application before you tonight looks to remedy and regularise the planning permission. This application resolves a number of the technical challenges associated with utilities and also makes minor amendments to some of the houses, which improves the street scene and living accommodation for future residents. Over the last few months, we have worked proactively with your officers, Matthew Wild and Chris Padgey, and I would like to thank them for their thorough report. We have looked to remedy the inconsistency made to Plot 1 fronting onto Polcat Road. This gateway building will now have bays on both its front and side elevation, making it a double-fronted house and an attractive entrance to the site. Further fenestration and render will also be added to the side elevation. During the construction period, we have worked well with our neighbours, and that is reflected by no objections from them or the parish council. In terms of technical constraints, it became apparent during construction that a gravity feed for foul drainage would not be possible. As such, a foul pump will be required. We have worked with officers to find a suitable position to locate the pump. It is now discreetly located within the edge of the public open space, over 50 metres from the nearest residential dwelling. The pump will have a brick surround with landscaping around it, meaning it will seem part of the landscape. During construction, it also became apparent that the existing substation was in good condition and could remain in situ. By remaining in situ, we would no longer have to dig up our neighbours' drives to plant new cables, which has been welcomed by them. The result of the substation remaining has resulted in the loss of one home on the site. Importantly, the number of affordable dwellings and tenure split has remained the same. I am pleased to inform members tonight that should planning permission be granted, we have an affordable housing provider lined up to take on the affordable homes, ensuring local people and families can remain in the area and have access to genuinely affordable homes. The proposals before you tonight will ensure the delivery of much needed market and affordable homes on an allocated brownfield site. I do hope members can agree with the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. And now move on to the officer presentation, which is Matthew's turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So the application before members this evening is a further variation of condition application to the development Apple Tree Farm. Obviously, we had the original permission, and we've had a couple of variations that have also been before you as well. This application is a Section 73A application, meaning that it seeks to regularise changes to the original planning permission, some of which have actually been built or partially built. I won't go into the detailed site history because we could be here a while, but I think I'll just go through the main areas of discrepancy, part of which has been raised at public question time, just to show you the issues and what's been done to change and address those issues. And I think as well, you'll see on the long description that it's seeking to vary other pre-commencement and above ground development conditions to make sure that these details are submitted and approved if the application goes through this evening, just so that there's no issues with probity, and in terms of if the consent gets issued, there's no outstanding conditions that require information pre-commencement, because obviously the development has commenced. So just as a quick reminder of the site, where it is, Ty Green to the left, to the north west, and Cressing to the northeast. So the previously approved site plans, this is the very original one. Just wanted to include that for reference. And then the developers helpfully provided some annotations of where some of the changes are, and I'll talk you through those. I think it's worth noting that this part of the site has changed slightly, as you can see, and that was part of one of the previous variations, which I won't go into, but this variation obviously seeks to build on that, but also address the issue of plot 1, which was discussed. I'll show you that. The retention of the substation and the loss of the unit, so it now be 77 dwellings rather than 78. Just a minor extension to one house type there. And then the southern half of the site, so the addition of the pump station and the inclusion of some of the bay windows to some of the 3-bedroom units. One of the points that's been raised following the publication of the committee report was that actually on the location plan there's a sort of a belt of scrub or trees that's been shown on the plan. Actually, that was always consented to be removed as part of the original tree protection plan, or not in this case for that particular section. So you can see in red there that was to be removed. The Swiss bit is removed. So what we've asked the developer to do following the meeting is just a minor amendment, just to take that out, take that hedge out, just to make sure that that the plan is, for completeness really, it's obviously a very minor point, but just we'll make sure the plan revision number is updated. But yeah, just want to make members aware of that really. That's the intention if approval is recommended this evening. So plot 1 as built down below, the very entrance to the site. The plot 1 as approved was as above. You can see that the visual interest on the side elevation is handed to what's actually been built, but this elevation is the one you'd see here. Is quite a bit lacking in terms of fenestration. The bay is on the front rather than the side as agreed. Yeah, it's very prominent. It would be a very prominent part of the site. Look, as I said, just as dual frontage, there's open space over here, so you'll see it in views coming on the road, but also from the open space. So the developer listened to officer concerns, and on this particular house have agreed to put in a bay at the side, retain the bay at the front, and also put some additional fenestration in and render on this. So essentially what you're looking at now would be a much better articulated building with sufficient visual interest. The wider house type, so it is part of, there's a few of these, well, about 4 or 5 of these houses on the development. The other houses won't have the bay at the front because obviously that was built, that was only left because it was built, but it will still have the bay at the side. There'll be a mixture of render and non-render, but the fenestration is there, and you've got additional side window there as well in the gable. So the substation retention, so initially there was a dwelling up here, and we'll see that later. But one of the things was about making sure that vista, as you come down this road in the development, was sufficient, because buildings should enclose spaces where there's like boundary at the back. In this case, they have sought to put a feature tree in, put a nice brick wall, some ornate detailing, which you can sort of see down here. I appreciate can't see it too well on the slides, but yeah. So the view down that road should be much better now, and also the house type. Well, plot 10 anyway is going to have side gable, so side bay, to basically give that area some surveillance. So it's, you know, it has some, it's overlooked essentially. And then this just shows the existing, what it is at the moment. So I went out on site today just to give you an up-to-date position. Did get a bit muddy, but the substation's just up here, and you can see it just over here. So we'll be in the bricks around. You can see where the foundations have been put in for that plot 10, and this is where the open space would be. The pump station, so as has been said, it's been a necessity from the construction stage rather than from the outset. Initially, the pump station was proposed to be put around here, and you can sort of see the position of the wet well on the site. We raised considerable concerns with that, given its prominence in the location. So we've worked with the developer to put it further over into the open space, to be sort of in some of the vegetation there, and also through a landscape condition we'll get further landscaping around there. As has been said, it will be enclosed by a brick wall, so it will provide a much nicer edge, and nice, you know, instead of like just a palisade fencing, which is often what you see these things put in. And I think, yeah, just to say that officers are now satisfied with the location of the pump station and the detailing that was proposed. And then there was just some very minor points. So that was this is the house type where the small extension is on the back, and this is the house type that has the bay at the front. The 10-year plan, just very briefly. So the loss of this unit, which was an affordable unit, that meant that the affordable unit has to be replaced or relocated. So what's happened is, if you look down here, you'll see there's 2 shared ownership units. But what's happened essentially is that one of those shared ownership units has become the rented unit, which would be lost. And then there'll be a new shared ownership unit, which was formerly on a market unit. Just a couple of photos, just briefly, just to show you some of the good work that's gone on the site. You know, when the majority of the development has been built in accordance with the plan always being built. As I said, those points that I raised where it hasn't, but obviously will be rectified if approval is granted. But you can see that it's forming what hopefully will be a very good development, and certainly lots of open space on the site, which obviously at the moment's got all the construction items on, but once that's finished, obviously that will get landscapes, etc. So just to very briefly summarise, so the application seeks to regularise and improve condition changes made to condition 2, which is the plan condition, seeks to effectively discharge the other conditions 3, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14, 16 and 18 attached to the original consent. I was in the report, I said I'll provide an update on the wording of condition 5, which is condition 6. The environmental health officer has actually confirmed that they're satisfied with the wording as drafted in the report for that condition to do with remediation and contamination. So that's all fine. So overall, the changes made proposed are considered to be acceptable by officers. So the recommendation before you this evening is to approve, subject to the deed of variation to the original Section 106 agreement and additional condition. So the additional condition is to do with the affordable housing accessibility. That they've submitted a letter already to say that the plots have been designed to comply with the accessibility standard, which is all about wheelchair, etc., wheelchair accessibility for the ground floor units. This condition seeks to make sure that once these properties are built, that we receive confirmation that they have been built as they've had approval for, i.e. that they are complying with Part M4 Category 2 of the building regulations. So this condition I'm proposing to add on if members are looking to approve. There's also a couple of additional plan numbers which were omitted in the plan lists, which need to be included. And obviously there will be a slight revision to the site plan, as I said, with the to just basically take out that little bit of vegetation, which as a legacy is part of the consent, which was always to be removed. So, so with those three and that one additional plan amendment, and that is it. Thank you. Any questions, please?
Thank you, Matthew. Members, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chairman. We accept the apology from the developer for the irregularities which have arisen that are down to them, except that some have occurred that are unavoidable. But please that you recognise that it's important to build to a permission as it is precisely laid down, and it's precisely laid down for that very reason. But pleasing to see that working with officers, you have been able to together regulise the changes. I think on balance the substation remaining where it is a plus, and I think also the pump location is now a decided improvement. So, I'm sort of happy to applaud and to approve that. So, I think I've followed the technical detail and the sort of number changes. So, I'm happy to move officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. I assume that's with the additional condition and plans.
The whole package.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I'm happy to second this as well. And also acknowledge the applicant in coming back to vary the application as well. It wasn't too long ago that we were having to deal with a retrospective planning commission where the developer had built out, sold, and people had moved in to some properties, and we were frustrated at having to grant retrospective planning permission. So, again, commend the applicant for working with our officers to get that in place before any further construction takes place. Nothing further to add. Happy to second. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I also endorse those comments as well. Any other members wish to do? Councillor Bowers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Okay, that one works now. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I concur with the comments of both Councillors Mann and Councillor Ritchie. Surprised Councillor Abbott didn't stay for this item, considering it's his own ward and it has been a site of a history of a very contentious application over the years. The only question I've got, and I support the application, is considering the history of the site, can I just double check that the Parish Council didn't offer any response at all? I know it's mentioned in the report, but since the report, has there been any response from the Parish Council? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. No, we haven't received any correspondence from them, despite obviously consulting them as part of the due process.
Okay, thank you.
Chris was say something.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to briefly comment on the background to the application. Obviously, it's been mentioned this evening that obviously the developer hasn't built in accordance with the original consent that was granted. I just wanted to, I suppose, reassure members that in terms of the work the officers have done behind the scenes on this, we had a very frank and clear conversation with the developer early on that we would not tolerate that approach from developers, and that there was no hesitation on our side to take quite extensive enforcement action if it was required. And as part of those conversations with the developer, we were able to get to a stage where we were comfortable with the detailed plans and proposals that are before you this evening. And I just wanted to reassure members really that should members decide to grant permission for this further variation, we will ensure compliance with the consent which is granted, and we obviously now benefit from additional resources within our planning enforcement team, including our new compliance officer. So our new compliance officer will be making sure that the amendments within this application that are required to be put right on the site are complied with, and we will ensure that that is followed up. But we did make it very clear to the developer, obviously we were very disappointed in terms of what had been undertaken on the site, and but we are pleased that we are able to have those constructive conversations with the applicant, and that we've been able to bring forward an acceptable application from an office perspective here this evening. But I just wanted to give members that reassurance that the process would not end here this evening. We will ensure full compliance. We'll ensure the development is now built out in accordance with the variation should members decide to grant. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Well, thank you, Chris, for your attention on and the other offers on this application, and for being robust and making sure that the actual planning commission conditions were complied with. Members, anybody else like to make any comments? Okay, it has been moved by Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Ritchie, that we grant this application. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. So we'll now move on to our final application this evening, which is... Oh, Councillor Bowers is saying good night. Good night, Councillor Bowers. Is application number 22/03086, PDEM, which is 4 Critter Drive, Braintree. We don't have any speakers on this evening, so we'll move straight to the presentation, which is going to be given by Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Let me just share my screen. Okay, thank you, members. This is a relatively straightforward application. So it is a prior approval application for demolition of an existing industrial building at 4 Critter Drive in Braintree. The reason for reporting this application, as members will know under the scheme delegation, prior approval applications, because they are time limited, are usually dealt with under delegated authority. As the site in this case is owned by Braintree District Council, the application is being reported for probity reasons and to seek to determine the application via planning committee. But it is really as simple as the description says. The proposal here is for the prior approval of the demolition of a disused industrial building. So just in terms of the location of the site, we are at 4 Crittall Road in Braintree, which is on the Springwood Drive industrial estate. I have a picture of the existing building which is proposed for demolition. Some members may be familiar with the site. And then in terms of the assessment that's been undertaken by officers is it's been concluded that against the criteria within Class B, Part 11 of the General Permitted Development Order, the proposed demolition complies with those requirements. The proposed means of demolition and remediation of the site are considered to be acceptable as set out within the application, and officers consider that the appropriate recommendation in this case is that prior approval is required for the demolition, but that prior approval is given for the demolition of the building. And there isn't really much more I can say on the application. It is a process that exists for a fast-track decision to allow for demolition of buildings. The officer's assessment is that it complies with the criteria. Happy to answer any questions, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mann.
Move officer's recommendation, Chair. I look forward to a subsequent application for a new build, one presumes.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Final seconder, Councillor Lynch. Thank you. Any members wish to say anything? Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Lynch. We grant the application. All those in favour? Thank you, members. That has been granted unanimously. Thank you, members. That brings us to the end of our meeting this evening. I'd say wish you all good night and Merry Christmas.